Good morning, and I hope you're all awake. This issue, of Baltic security, it's even more technical at some point, in some cases. So I'm sorry for overwhelming you with some information, but let's just get over it and understand what's happening actually there, because it's not only about gas market, it's also about electricity and developing that market that it's more successful, and also about liquidity. But yeah, more or less, what's the major issues and what the major topics are going on? It's about independence and interdependence, and if is there any room for regional cooperation? Because what's really typical for Baltic countries and Baltic region for the last, I think, 20 years of their independence, they started to create their own policies, and it's difficult for them really to negotiate them. You are here now in Visegrad group, that is already a good brand of cooperation. Unfortunately, B3, like Baltic 3, kind of failed to develop that. So they're really always trying to implement that success story of Visegrad 4 cooperation, but at some point it's not that successful. Then, of course, energy outlook, what's the mix and why it's important in this region. Of course, the markets are really small in demand, but that does not change the security perspective of the region. And of course, these important issues yesterday I mentioned about stress tests and how we actually substitute all shortage that would occur, for example, if we would decide completely to substitute Russian gas, or if Russia on its side would decide to cut it. And projects are important not just because we should invest them and construct just for the sake of constructing, but they create liquidity, they create market. And basically what's happening there, and what we can see in overview of whole agenda of the region, that it's everlasting problem of security of supplies that they're trying to solve out, and that became really politicized. That politicizing issue that those countries would always prefer probably to depend on Norway in 100%, but not on Russia. And generally speaking, since they acquired independence, and Soviet Union broke down, there were more than 43 gas cutoffs from the Russian side. There are technical nature, there are many in nature, political and technical. It's really important to understand how it's happening. And politicization of energy price, it's important to understand that for many years before Lithuania took this brave move to implement the third energy package like wolves, they became a kind of success story in the region, but they took really huge political risk. But before that, they were paying 30% higher price than an average in European Union, and Estonia and Latvia are paying around 15% higher price. That's really important to understand where they're located. So what's the price actually to pay for transmission costs? So this is politicized. That's interesting also to understand and to think about to which extent we see how we implement energy security policy, or we are going just to diversification and market creation, or we are going to diversification. And this became really typical in the region, because before crisis in Ukraine, Balts across the alliance, NATO alliance, they were perceived more or less like, oh, you're crazy Balts, you're paranoid that you don't like Russia. You're just on the border, just get over it and everything is fine, nothing would happen. Now, when actually Ukrainian crisis happened, they have now the glory time, that they can share actually how to deal with Russia and what are the security risks, also soft power influence and economic influence. There are many factors. The Russian minority region, there is economic dependency, there are many factors that you can push and explore and use those tools on the one side of Russia. And kind of dependency is not just a theoretical problem, so we can see political and non-political cut-off of gas. And what's interesting concept that how we can see how Russia actually behaves in the region is that by energy, and exports, of course, always putting money in a budget in Russia. Putin always somehow covers the deficit of democracy. And this now it somehow fails because money are not already going inside of Russia, I mean in a budget, somehow they're wasting that, and that deficit of democracy is already not in fulfillment, so he cannot give back that social contract that he has with the society. But the point how before it worked pretty well and was implemented in Baltic region, it's more or less obvious. If to see the cutoffs, especially across the European Union, there are political cutoffs, and we saw that in the case of Ukraine, but they're also technical, and technical is really important in a Baltic country because synchronization of electricity, interconnectors and grids with Russia are important because Russia has its territory of Kaliningrad, and it has to supply it. And also the gas storage in Latvia, it's also Leningrad, St. Petersburg region also depends on it in the high spikes of demand in winter. So basically, Russia can take that and cover the shortage that it has in spike consumption periods, and actually to leave the countries in the Baltic region without anything, because the capacities in interconnectors and in grids are kind of limited, and they're really kind of implemented up to the demand, so it's really easy for them to be in a shortage, and they saw it, and it sometimes is really not political, it just the demand spikes. And what's interesting, I mean, Russia's political reliability on energy supplies, we can see like it's in a time perspective, the receiver and the context. It always depends who is a partner, who is on the receiving side of a pipeline. So somehow Baltic region is not perceived like, you know, a preferential partner to cover it with the gas or electricity. Looking at the energy mix, if you like numbers, Estonia is a bit different story from Latvia and Lithuania. Why it's interesting case? Because it consumes and imports gas, and it's only like around 9% in its energy mix. But you should remember that it does not change the security implication perspective, because if Estonia won't receive those even 9%, it won't hold on for it would hold on just for 5 days around like that, because they have not developed a sufficient fuel storage facilities, so to substitute really fast, you know, like in emergency case in 24 hours or so on, some household heating. So that can be a really big problem. In Finland, it's around like 3 months, and Latvia, Lithuania, it's a bit longer term, they can hold on. What's interesting, that percentage also in producing electricity, gas in Estonia is only around 1%, while in Latvia and Lithuania it's much higher, around 50%. So this Estonia case of oil shale is really interesting in perspective of European Union and environmental taxes, environmental program, how to bring more renewables and minimizing carbon. And in this sense, Estonia is really even in a weaker position, because it has to think, would it phase out from using that much of oil shale? This is a unique country in across the European Union, and relying on that. Why oil shale is really important for Estonia? Because on social level, it gives to GDP 4% and employment around 1%. And I will show you, like, for your entertainment, some pictures about that, because you see, Estonia is really trying to implement all the requirements of European Union, and actually to show that it increases the percentage of renewables, and it really promised by 2020 to deliver the highest result in the region. The point of this region is they're competing to give a good image and on strategic level, to be a role model in European Union, to be a brand. And this is the point of being a small country. So creating a brand of cybersecurity and then creating a brand of success story. They're creating a brand, of course, of good alliance in NATO. Estonia, in comparison, in contrast with Latvia, Lithuania, really deliver 2% of GDP to national defense, and they have already boots on the ground. They're really happy. And on energy, this is a really tricky question, because they submit to European Union the data of final energy consumption, and this really mixes up the picture, because when you produce, and now the electricity networks are connected, so when they produce now electricity, they put actually it on a market, on not full spot trading market. So it mixes up with already, for example, more clean and renewable produced electricity from Sweden, Norway, and Finland. So this consumption, so they consume already that lower level of fossil fuels as a primary production fuel in the mix. So the point is that they're a bit lying to European Union about the statistics, but it's the European Union that gives the option for every country to submit two kinds of data, or primary production or primary consumption. So basically, I mean, if I'm Estonia, I would always submit the data of final consumption, because I consume already mixed package of energy, electricity, for example, from the region. While other countries, like I mean, Sweden wouldn't care, Norway wouldn't care, so they submit, for example, the data of final production mix. So this is what we also have to understand. I mean, how we sometimes rely on ourselves when we create these huge strategies, and it's not just about good statistics on a paper and, I mean, good commission reports in the end. So basically, what pre-oil shale era in Estonia, it looks like this, because Estonia is really flat, and islands, flat, and forest. Just for your entertainment, this is post-oil shale. This is really really bad thing for environment. Those are second produced after exploration of oil shale, so you would erupt and exploit this and get oil gas or second oil products. So environmentally, this is intoxicating. So finally, what Estonia is doing that is it created a skiing slope. So, okay, it's smart, but for how long? The country could rely on oil shale for 80%, 90%, and to really deliver European Union those numbers that it needs. And this is really important, the social, social contract, because the population is a level of living and standards in Estonia are, I mean, averagely higher than in Latvia, Lithuania, I mean, salaries and so on. There is a huge number of like 24,000 people employed in oil shale extraction production. A population of Estonia is 1,400,000, so it's really not a lot. So it's a big percentage of population who really dependent on those oil shale plants to be remaining. So this campaign is really all the time appearing. It appeared recently, the video, and that when Estonia really already was going to implement the higher tax on oil shale products and oil shale exploration. So actually to deliver what the European Union is demanding from Estonia is to raise the environmental taxes. And those campaigns are ongoing. I mean, and oil shale is perceived as an important creator of GDP, as an important creator of labor force and labor market. I mean, it's really kind of interesting in perception of the whole European Union as a small country. And but when we talk about gas, okay, we overviewed the oil shale, it remains. The point also about oil shale is the drop in oil prices, so the benchmark when it would be economically efficient to keep on producing, especially the oil products from oil shale, because from oil shale you can produce gas. There are different kind of production lines. And they're really now working a lot in all laboratories that I'm always meeting with them. Like I saw these engines that they try to increase the efficiency. It's the point now not to minimize the amount of oil shale exploration sites, but to increase the efficiency. So, so you would probably expose the same amount of toxic or whatever carbon emission, but your efficiency, how much you would get energy, would be increased. That's priority for Estonia. But anyway, the benchmark when it's profitable still to keep on producing, it's dropping down. So probably around if oil price would drop to somewhere $35 per barrel, for them it will be not profitable. So they would have to consider probably to substitute by gas. Even like I think even 35 is really too optimistic, because there are several benchmarks. One benchmark for producing electricity, and for producing production of electricity, benchmark is around 50, so they're really on the edge. That would be the point to substitute the oil shale by gas. But even if not, let's see that the stress test that showed that even these countries that the gas demand in the region is really low. I mean, Latvia, Lithuania, they annual import like around 1.5 BCM, Estonia less than 1 BCM, Finland around like 3 BCM. Really small market in accumulation, but for them it's really important because some households, they're not central, they're not connected to the kind of central heating grid, but it's different, and they would depend only on that natural gas that is important, so they would feel a shortage in 5 days. And the problem of that Estonia appeared to be the most vulnerable, but Estonian government tried to explain why they're not that vulnerable. They tried to give the argument that they would import gas from the Inchulkan's gas storage facility in Latvia. That's wrong answer, because this storage facility is controlled by Gazprom. The Gazprom holds around 34% of shares, but they also company of Itera that holds another 16. So in sum up, it's more than 50. And this is important to understand that Gazprom still has really control over important strategic facility in Baltic countries, even if unbundling was implemented by Lithuania like a wolf. In Estonia, also the TCOs and all companies, they were unbundled. Latvia is lagging behind, and they already asked the exemption and wait till April 2017. This is still, I mean, 2 years to go. That's a lot, and this kind of stress test, they cannot rely on those facilities. Actually, the ownership is on that parties that can cut that gas. This is not reasonable. So basically, that's why these countries, after the stress test, they started to be kind of nervous that they're losing the good schoolboy image in European Union. So they started to negotiate among themselves, because basically how gas storage facility in Latvia works in emergency cases, that you would have to have a contract of covering preferential consumers. So the preferential consumers are basically on the Russian side or Latvian side. Lithuania going next one, and Estonia never had any contract, any legal ties with Latvia that Latvia would supply in emergency case some gas from the storage. The storage is about like 2.3 BCM, so it's not big. So this is, it cannot be considered as a really reliable security. Get out from the situation. Yeah. And about that Estonia is by now and booked the really small capacity, and for 2015 to import from Lithuania LNG. It's also explained by the limited transmission capacity in the pipelines, because basically how the region has those pipelines are from the Russian side, and connectors inside the Baltic region are really of small capacity, but that's the point of BEMIP project for European Union to expand and construct new ones. That's the point of it, collaboration. And as we saw, I mean, maybe you didn't mention, but there are different scenarios when we try to calculate how we would substitute those shortages of gas and energy in a case of gas cutoff. So we should always think if the country would be considering to cover their shortage first, or just to maybe they would fall in a little bit more shortage but supply it to its neighbor. Even this is the case in Germany in big extent, because let's imagine that the Nord Stream also stops to supply, and then Germany would be left with some limited interconnector with Netherlands. The Netherlands and Belgium has limited interconnector with United Kingdom, so the whole LNG that possible to supply to United Kingdom would reach Germany with like 20% of that. So Germany would cover its own shortage by let's say 50%, and it would have option, for example, to give another 10% to the neighboring country, and supply another amount from Norway. But that's the point. If the country would be willing to give that amount to the neighboring country, and that's the point of collaboration. And that's the point that in Baltic regions the collaboration and cooperation proved to be non-efficient, non-successful, because there are many stories. I mean, one of the European Union projects to construct a railway and connect finally the whole countries and bring them even in railway connection of the European Union failed, because the three countries could not agree on how to name it. Basically, they were in these really ridiculous terms. So, I mean, this proves that Estonia does not understand Latvia at some point, and Latvia doesn't understand Lithuania, and they're all around. So why is it happening? Because as we saw, it's also in energy comes from different energy mixes. So they have basically different energy policies. So Estonia would always try to protect its oil shale production, and it's really competitive at the moment when it produces oil shale, when it has all access to do that. It has cheaper final electricity, so it really competes on the electricity market. While Latvia, Lithuania, when they have their final electricity production, their final cost is higher than Estonia. So finally, they try always to protect their market. And there were cases that I will explain later on electricity market, how Latvia and Lithuania were actually dumping prices. And that was in the beginning when they were entering NPS power market in the whole Nordic region. And yeah, I mean, the main dispute issues, as probably you all heard about LNG terminal, where to put it in Finland or Estonia, is already, I mean, the money from European Union were ready to come, but the political decision was not that. But that's a problem on strategic level. If you consider to secure the region, so you have to consider that you have to have a spillover of infrastructure on a regional level. So beneficial, I mean, for everyone. It's not about constructing in every country something its own. And it's a good case of Lithuania, it worked out at the moment, but it might be not the case if everyone would start doing so. And yeah, I mean, gas interconnection infrastructure, I mean, the deadlines are all the time pushing back, so because between Finland and Estonia, that's really important to finally, I mean, to bring their interconnectors. There is nothing in the gas terms. But the decision of where to put LNG terminals should have come first, so the deadline was pushed a lot. And yeah, I mean, common electricity regulations that I would explain later how they were dumping that. I mean, basically about cooperation and how actually that what I mentioned, the brand of exporting it outside what the Baltic region is, it's somehow, you know, to create B3 format. That's one term is like Baltic chain. It came from the Soviet Union and the time of occupation they were creating, and human chain, and actually it resembles what they have to have now in a sense of interconnector of gas. So I mean, they managed to create that kind of, and it is still a great symbolism in the region. They always remember that every year they repeat that. I mean, in Estonia and Tallinn, even people are really building up and on a border with Latvia. But when it comes to political and policy making decisions, it's different now. I mean, we created this map and ICDS a little bit before, when EstLink 2 was constructed already, so that's already like full line. I will show you. Yeah. So this electricity map of interconnectors. So Estonia already connected to Finland by EstLink 1, EstLink 2. So this upgrade is really good. So actually it opened already the full access of Estonia and Finland to mix up the final energy electricity production. So basically then there are interconnectors, I mean Finland, Sweden, Norway, and this is kind of a circuit that creates this kind of Nordic, Baltic now NPS, Nord Pool spot power market. This is a success story of the region because this one interconnector Lithuania-Poland would be coming up soon, 2016. Then Lithuania-Sweden as well. So when they would complete it, so infrastructurally wise it would be completed, but there are other think of synchronization. And synchronization, it would come synchronization of the region with the central continental European electricity market, and desynchronization from the Russian one. So that would be already more technically difficult and painful for Russia. So Russian regions of St. Petersburg and Kaliningrad would really have bad times in that terms. So or they should synchronize finally with this region or nothing. So basically, this is a success story. This is not success story because here you see, I mean, even deadline and it's everything agreed. They're working on that, but here, as I was like mentioning, all this LNG terminals, is this interconnector is really important and still decision wise. It's kind of agreed that Finland would would give a green light to several LNG terminals. Estonia still have not like clearly decided where it would put its own, but the pipeline would be on, so it will be financed by European money. And then, of course, upgrade of these interconnectors. And what's important, from Lithuania to Poland, JPL, and when it comes up, that's finally when this energy island, because there's still gas energy island, would be connected to the whole European market and can actually become a part of the European market, because if you're upgraded by pipeline, you're still not a market player. In this sense, they're already market players. In this sense, they are not infrastructurally players. I mean, in electricity-wise, they're energy peninsula, as I mentioned all these projects. So basically, to remind you, that's LitPol is this Lithuania-Poland electricity interconnector that will be coming up soon. First phase will be 2016. This amount is kind of half of the amount what Estonia already has with Finland. Then North Balt, it's Lithuania, Sweden. Then why it's important to be in NPS and how it functions, because you're a producer, you put and you claim that you put actually the whole production that you produce electricity on the market. So even if you are not that efficient producer still of electricity in the region, the price would even up from like cheaper producer, more expensive producer, because when you're mixing up and putting up, so the price evens and balance from shortage to surplus. So that's the point that Estonia already started to get even, I mean, at some point maybe Estonia started to get lower prices, but for example Latvia, Lithuania started to get better prices. But we have to mention, you have to understand that before they had contracts, and what it's not completely proved, but all market analysts, they are assuring that Latvia and Lithuania, what they were doing, that they were putting some part of their production on the market, and another part they were selling directly to consumers behind the market. So finally, they were creating a shortage on the market, so the prices were really hiking up on the NPS, while they were getting money directly, like, you know, selling like directly to your neighbor or to your some industries, electricity, and not putting it on the market. So that's it. So that's the experience of dumping prices, and it should be always controlled. If you're really going to be a market player, so let's be that in that way. So that's how we would create a lower cost and a more balanced price. So basically, I mean, that would function also in the gas market if we would create, I mean, more liquidity. The liquidity is a factor of that, of balancing the price. And yeah, I mean, factually, all Baltic countries now are part of not full spot power market. And yeah, and about prices, that's interesting fact that sometimes it's also not politically prices are, you know, high, like going really high or dumping, because in Norway and in Sweden there are different factors when they get really good production of electricity. And this is what we are talking about, political and non-political cutoffs, or political and non-political, you know, hikes in prices. But this is the market, and when you enter a market, you accept that you would be accepting risks. And yeah, I mean, that's the factors that your electricity prices would depend on in this region. So it's interesting, actually, that let's imagine I would be happy that there will be really rainy weather in Sweden and Norway. I mean, they were suffering and being in depression, but we will get better electricity prices because it really depends on hydro production and wind turbines. So basically, they have really high level of this kind of production. And yeah, basically the prices in 2014 were like at level 37. There was like a Morphy's law, but when they put S-Link 2 to Finland, the first 2 days it was shut down for technical reasons, and the prices on the whole region like were hiking up. So everyone was hating that connector at that time, but now it's fine. They solved it, but they were not lucky. But now they actually got a better price. I mean, almost 13% lower. So that's the outcome of joining the market. Of course, it's really painful at some moment to construct everything, but they still have to synchronize with the whole European continent. And this is the point which I'm sorry. Which regions we have of power market? Yeah, basically, this Russia on the border with Baltic countries, and they're still synchronized to IPS, UPS. That is Russian market, and that's what they should do. I mean, in the next up to probably 2020, 2025. It's still long term. But desynchronization has lots of problems, so you would have to create a really huge backup and to secure yourself from a huge shortfalls. And in political and security level and political implication of relations with Russia would place this, I mean, Kaliningrad supply and transmission shortage is controlled by Russia at the moment, because basically in circuits, because this already circuit, now they're in this circuit located. Russia controls it because it maintains the major, I mean, power plants that are in territory of St. Petersburg and on territory of Russia. So when they would desynchronize that, before that decision, Russia would press or politically or would decide also to synchronize to this, at least to this region of Baltic and Nordic. I'm not talking about this huge decision of this region, of the whole European continental one. Yeah, I mean, it's already about gas, as I mentioned about electricity. Do you have any ideas, thoughts, questions? Because I understand that it might sound really technical at some point, but it's really important to understand where the whole security strategic level really intersects with all technical details. I mean, desynchronization sounds like, oh, technical, but at the point before you do so, you have really, you're dependent on big power plants in Russia. For example, Russia would stop it because it has its territory of Kaliningrad crossing there. So this is there's some kind of technical things that you have to implement and to understand to create this strategical view of the region and security.
What is the potential for renewables in the Baltics in general?
In general, there no, but in other countries there is there's a share of renewable energy, but it's in Estonia, so it's raising up to like 26%. But I think Latvia, Lithuania, they have much higher than Estonia. It's just Estonia in case it is less renewable. But I won't confuse with that. Here you see gas, oil, feed. Yeah, probably. I mean, I can speak for Estonia.
In general, is there any potential for it to grow substantially? Or?
Yeah, because they really subsidize that now. They put lots of like subsidies and investments in that, because basically what they have now a deadline of 2020 to give their results to European Union. So, or if not, they would have to increase the environmental taxes really, like, you know, a lot. That you saw, if that would happen much more in Estonia. The social unrest, I mean, they won't like the decision. So it's a gradual step. So, and biomass and using biomass is increasing in Estonia, but it's slowly but gradually. So I mean, they really deliver the result, because you saw the trend line.
And like there's the political will to increase the renewables? Yeah,
because then you would have to increase the environmental taxes. You would have to pass that bill, and if you don't, the European Union would punish you, because this is what you're signing up when you enter in the European, energy market and policies, common policies.
I mean, if you compare like the stance of like, for instance, Poland about this, like I don't think Poland really cares if they won't meet their targets.
Yeah, but that's the point of how the countries perceive their cooperation in European Union, because for these countries it's really important actually to be perceived well. That's what I mentioned about the will to give that good image. And of course, in Estonia case, it's really difficult because its oil shale is really the most pollutant. It's like hard rock. So, and you really extract, many carbon emission as well. So basically, it's very important. On gas, as I mentioned, it's the BEMI project. So the GIPL connection with Lithuania is the most important. And then, of course, LNG facilities. Of course, as we already discussed, in Chulkan's gas storage facility. So the priorities for that is unbundling. So reschedule, 2017, but can be pushed further, to implement earlier. Then they should upgrade the capacity, because if in case LNG market, and it should be LNG market developed there, so there should be bigger storage, because then you would be, you would create bigger liquidity if you would bring LNG, and liquidity if when you keep, you can keep the regasified gas, or you would have to just to store cargoes on your shore. But there's options that Spain can use, but the small countries won't be able to use that option that much. The technical side, that upgrade is set deadline 2020. And of course, an agreements on preferential security of supply. they have to book their capacities when in terms of emergency. But let's imagine if the shares of Gazprom would remain there, what's the deal? I mean, to make that contract if there would be a party that Russia stops the gas supply to these countries. So it technically, and the EU rate has control over the gas storage facility as well. I mean, basically this is a diagram how much every country, I mean, extracts. But again, those numbers, because you have to convert it, but they're really small because again, the demand of gas in Estonia, it's less than 1 BCM, it's 0.6, while in Latvia, Lithuania, it's around 1.2, like that. And about, I mean, strategic concept of why we need those upgrades, why we need those pipelines. Basically, it is, I mean, Poland and Central Europe plays important and crucial role in that. And JPL and already Polish LNG terminal, they come up as important factors. Why? Again, I mean, bigger volumes, bigger liquidity, bigger market, lower prices. And basically, of course, there's the description of all kind of priority projects, because it's not just creating one and building one GPL. It's also about using Yamal pipeline in Poland in both directions. They created, I mean, now reverse flow recently, but it's only like around it's, I don't know, around up to 5, but less, 4.6 something BCM. It's really low, while Yamal in one direction can supply a lot. That's the requirement actually of all gas market upgrade, is to create bidirectional capacity in pipelines. But again, as I mentioned yesterday, if there is a contract over pipelines with a non-European community partner, so, I mean, basically Gazprom doesn't want to implement any third energy package requirements, so it's difficult to do that kind of things on the pipelines that has the biggest capacity in Europe, but they're kind of out of those options. Of course, if we go further, how to create a kind of this liquidity, if you have to go from Baltic then to Poland, and then further from Poland to Czech Republic, to Germany, to Slovakia. So that's why the upgrading interconnector Poland and Czech Republic is important, because basically after 2009, Czech Republic and Slovakia became really successful in that case. They already connected the pipelines and liquidity to the north trading hub spots, I mean gas trading spots. While Poland still has all these commercially and strategically viable projects, but they all pushed in the deadlines further. So basically they would have to upgrade and already to be part of this group of this Czech Republic and with Slovakia, because basically all the liquidity depends on this Yamal pipeline, and now of course they're counting on LNG terminal, on JPL, on upgrading, I mean, with Czech Republic, the interconnector. So in this case, Poland has to do a lot, and that would mean a lot for the Baltic region. And of course, I mean, yeah, and that's why in a political level, Poland also voices all these ideas of becoming a gas hub, but this is too yet ambitious, because to be so, you have to firstly also to provide a platform for technically trading this gas. So legally, if they would supply lots of energy and gas, they would have need a virtual platform where they would put it, and basically the closest one is again the northern western gas trading hubs. That's again reliance on one kind of gas trading hubs or Austrian ones. And if legally they would create with the Baltic countries, probably also with Ukraine and with Slovakia, and further to the south, this kind of platform, or connected maybe to Austrian ones, that would be already upgrading one huge trade balance point in Europe. So then the price, the bigger actors of a market, like the case of electricity you saw, the bigger it became, like Norway, Sweden, already all Baltic countries, so the price was becoming better. And yeah, I mean, basically what they need is liquid market area, and everyone understands that, but at some point, you know, these projects, yes, they came up from political will to create a secure strategic platform of diversified energy supplies and in future to develop a market. And there's a point when the goals, some players, they started like to forget that it not just became a political project, but it's also a market project and also a security project. So there are kind of all implications going on here. And yeah, I mean, why it's important to, as I mentioned, to move from this JPL further into Europe. It's not just constructing one pipeline and connecting factually, I mean, on a paper that Lithuania is connected to Poland. Yahoo, and everyone would celebrate that now Baltic countries are not energy island anymore. That's not the case, because then further they have to create and move on this kind of already north-south corridors. And then again, the regional spillover, you would connect more countries that are still in could have shortage of gas supplies. And again, because this demand are really, I mean, they're really small country, I mean, in demand-wise. So basically, you need to bring closer, bigger markets, so just to create that kind of a price. Again, 5 BCM is really low. 5 BCM is just like Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. With Finland, it's 8 BCM. Again, I mean, is LNG a game changer? I mean, we're talking about a lot about LNGs, and on political level, it's a huge game changer. But again, this is too ambitious. I mean, in Davos, Lithuanian president, she told it's the end of pipeline era. It's not. Pipelines are there. It's a huge factor for liquidity for European Union. It's how we supply and ship gas, and it won't stop. Even if LNG is there, we need pipelines to move that. So, but anyway, she sends like other messages here. That, okay, the end power abuse by monopolistic supplier, true, and set a model example that it's so, and like technically speaking, they need now to, I mean, to increase this renewable share, of course, to prove, I mean, environmental side and standards, and to develop renewables basically. They now actually subsidize a lot on, I think, power and wind, but yeah, there are like other statistics on that. And basically to create a gas market, as she told, but again, to give such a announcements, political announcements that we end the pipeline era, it's still too ambitious. But anyway, independence, the name of LNG terminal, it brought like $100 discount per TCM. That's a huge political bargain, and basically they put Gazprom in really ridiculous position because it was a really game changer. And I think it's one of the unique cases in European Union when a country went ahead with a really rigorous implementation of a third energy package. They paid politically really, I mean, they've been in painful situation. They got like prices much higher. Then they went on with the implementation and construction of LNG. They brought, I mean, they negotiated pretty a lot with all possible LNG suppliers. So, and still negotiating, the negotiation ongoing, they're searching for economically viable LNG suppliers. But now we would see what the market can be of LNG in the region. I mean, and again, I mean, Estonia and Lithuania, they also argue, I mean, they would, to develop a market liquidity, not be feasible. And this is kind of, again, chicken egg situation because you have to invest first and eventually you would also, of course, you would create a liquidity, but then you have to really be competitive to go out and negotiate, to go out, I mean, to Belgium, maybe LNG importers, and to, like, to deal with them. Can we bid on your market? Can we supply from you one share that you are supplying? It's all a matter of negotiation. It's not only about like going and looking in Asian markets. Some markets are closer, much closer in Europe. And that's the point. I mean, creating this LNG market, there's one thing is about small-scale LNG. And the small-scale LNG, it became really driven, I mean, economically driven, especially in Finland. Why? Because the country is completely islands, so it's really easy to construct small ones, bunkering, and they always consider the final consumer bunkering ships because the traffic there is high. And also the industries are basically located on the shores of Finland. So it's kind of easy to bring LNG, small cargo ship, and to supply. I mean, basically last week in Poland, met one worker from the contractual company that they're building already one of LNG terminals in Finland. And they really kind of sound really optimistic about that, because this is really commercial side of LNG. This is those supplies are not considered as a security supply for household heater or like public consumption. They go directly to industries. But why it's important as well in Finland, because that would cover around like 25% of gas consumption. So basically, other one it's more easy maybe for government to cover. But anyway, this is good, I mean, creating kind of a market. So basically in Finland, the projects are more or less fixed, and they're already more or less like 3 or 4. They're changing more or less, I mean, every month, but more or less stable this in Tornio and Pori. And Gazum, it's actually always been more really under ownership of Gazprom, but they already decreased the share of Gazprom this year. So the government bought, and so Gazprom is left with around 20%. So it's better for Finnish, I mean, at least the gas market. But anyway, what's the problem? And from colleagues from Estonian companies, what we hear all the time that when they go to negotiate with the Finnish people, they talk to Russians. It's their approach to the business, and it's a bit different. So that's probably it's difficult to create kind of this and to implement this BEMI project really faster, especially in between Estonia and Finland. I mean, it's interesting case. I mean, Russia has lots of LNG, small-scale LNG bunkering projects closer to Baltic region, because they're really considering to supply Finland as well. So they're already launching one pretty soon in St. Petersburg. And what's the difference, I mean, about small-scale LNG and like medium-scale LNG? Because you have, I mean, liquefaction capacities are kind of smaller, and basically you need smaller cargo, so the marine traffic would be easier to control, and it minimizes, I mean, like risks, because actually LNG trade, every cargo, huge cargo in international level, it's always has really high force majeure clause in contract. So it's kind of sometimes it's expensive, but now with falling oil prices, at least the fueling up, the shipping costs are lower. And I mean, basically you don't need huge storage requirements, because you bring it and you supply it for probably bunkering, marine bunkering, also huge ships, or to your industries. And this is the case of Finland. Why for Finland it's really beneficial to create this kind of small-scale LNG market, because the small-scale LNG market is off-grid use, so you don't need to put it in the grid and to spread it. So basically, what you need your cargo, small cargo ship, and your final consumer, small like industry. In Estonia, they have one LNG, actually small terminal that supplies dairy dairy factory in the Saaremaa island. It exists because the marine traffic in the region is big, so there are possibilities to actually bring liquefied gas. And yeah, basically you see here marine and industry, and this is a scale that Finland perceives that it would be increasing in the region, the marine traffic and industries, so they would need more demand, probably, I mean, so the market can be developed. So in this perspective, they see it economically viable to develop. About what's interesting here, it's about that they already booked from the Brugge LNG terminal that is in Belgium as a player of big spot markets of LNG trade in the northwest region, the one part of LNG that would be brought, I mean, to Finland. So this is a point that I was raising, that actually you don't have to go to the global markets. You can go to the closest spot markets and to like talk to Belgian spot, I mean, to be at least a player in Belgian spot market trade. Yeah, and this is from yesterday, but this again to remind all these options, how probably it would be developing. It can be developed, but again, this is one of the options, and this is one of the really hugely strategic ones. So if we would sometimes miss out the investment return on some projects, so we could upgrade everything in Europe and to create liquidity, but at some points, probably, I mean, here it would be more politically based because those countries cannot invest a lot, so they would need a bigger investment backup. So, yeah. We still have some time for some discussion even. That's good. I mean, the last point, I mean, the fundamentals on global LNG markets, that's for the last days. You see the LNG prices in Asia. That Asia already these days, I mean, in February became not a primary market, not a prime. So basically, the LNG is more free. But this is a risk for actually LNG projects in Australia, for example, that they could really be not economically viable because when they started to put so many projects, I mean, online, the price was high. Now they would lose. But okay, the strongest would survive, and Europe could be one of the potential markets. So no, there are two sides of that. But and of course, I mean, NBP prices are here, so you see this point that actually they're crossing, and this is one of the historic points for the last years after the Fukushima disaster. So actually prices narrowed down to the same level. So this is the opportunity of United Kingdom now to import a lot. That's what they're doing now. But of course, we should see when the contracts on LNG supplies, when they're buying on spot market. But basically, and of course, on the shipment tariffs, because it's cheaper to ship from Qatar than from further markets. But now with the falling oil price, the shipment and fuel in the cargoes is cheaper.